Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Thursday, March the 12th. And welcome to our commentary. I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about something that we've talked about before, something that is happening almost on a daily basis in the country, and that is the shift of population from blue states to red states. But it's not just people who are moving. It's companies moving and huge ones that are moving. And the reason that they're moving, these companies, that is, the reason they leave California, they move to Texas, or they leave California and they move to Georgia, for example, or they move to Florida. The reason this is happening is because of the business climate. When you're a business, you obviously would like to be in a place where the business climate is not just favorable to your business, but favorable in general to doing business. And this is unfortunately not happening in California or in some of these other states. It isn't just the taxes, although the taxes are high, but it's the regulations, all the different labor regulations that mandates and so on that frankly make it very difficult to do business. So if you could move to Texas, for example, and not have that problem, or if you could move to Florida and not have that issue, well, you're going to do so. You're going to do so because you want to, obviously maximize your profits and maximize your business standing. So this is happening, and it's happening quite a bit. And in the article that I wrote, I link to another article where there's a whole list of these companies that are moving. Some are oil companies or manufacturing companies. I mean, just companies in different industries moving to Texas and Florida and so on, the so-called red states, moving to these states for the simple reason that the business climate is more attractive. And that's important if you're in a business. So I call it bye-bye blue, and that's what it is, bye-bye blue. And how this is, how these blue states have not figured that this is happening. I think they obviously know it's happening because when they look at their tax receipts, they see less people paying taxes. So obviously they know it's happening. But why they don't take more action to stop this from happening is beyond me. Because when a company, like some of these big companies, move, let's say, from one blue state to a red state, it's not just a physical address that they're changing. They're also paying now taxes in a red state. They're bringing people with them who are going to have to buy homes, rent properties, or whatever to live. They're going to have to buy food. They're going to have to drive cars and so on. So you're not just bringing the company itself and whatever economic value that has. You're also bringing the employees over. And the economic value that has is quite substantial. So it is really fascinating to me, just as a question. If I was a legislator in California, for example, I would be walking into the legislature and saying, hey, folks, why are we losing these companies? Why are they leaving us? And what can we do to stop it? Now, I'm sure they're having that conversation. I hope they are, but they're not doing anything about it. And you really have to wonder about the political pressure that some of these legislators are under. Now, I think in the case of California, one of the problems they have out there is the incredible pressure of the public sector unions. That puts a lot of pressure on these states to continue to have a bigger and bigger state. I think that's what a lot of it is. But anyway, whatever it is, it's not helping these states. And how they continue to allow this, why hasn't a Democrat running for governor, let's say in one of these states, why hasn't he or she said, folks, we got to stop this. We got to become more attractive for business to come here. Why that's not happening, well, that's a real mystery to me. Maybe it shouldn't be. I don't know. But it's just crazy. I've never seen anything like this before in the country's history, where you have this kind of shift of businesses going from blue states to red states. Of course, the other thing happening is the population. We've talked about that before. And you're already seeing the impact of that population shift on something as simple as the number of congressional districts in every state, or something even more important, the number of electoral votes in every state. For example, Texas is going to be adding 4 more congressional districts when the census is done again in 2030. That's 4 more seats that we're going to have in the Congress. That's very likely 4 more electoral votes going to the Republican candidate. So that's another matter, the population shift hurting many of these blue states as well. So I don't know. If I lived in one of those states, or if I was a legislator, I think this would be the number one issue for me. But maybe that's why I live in Texas and not in California. Well, I have a post coming out Friday morning. By the way, that's Friday the 13th, which I didn't think about that until right now. But anyway, I have a post coming out tomorrow, Friday, about something very strange happening in the UK. As you know, if you've ever been to England, or if you've ever seen British money, or the British pound, the paper bill that is, they have images, of course, of famous British personalities. And on the £5 banknote, there is an image of Winston Churchill, the great Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of the UK during their most difficult times in the 20th century, one of the greatest men of the 20th century, Winston Churchill. Well, they've decided, or they're talking about it. They're still talking about it. I guess they haven't made a final call. But they're still talking about the possibility of replacing these banknotes, or the images on these banknotes, with animals, on the basis that I guess animals are not as controversial. I guess that's the argument. So they're going to be replacing, if this goes through, Prime Minister Churchill, or his image on a banknote. They're going to be replacing him with a beaver, the animal. And I have nothing against beavers. I'm sure they're beautiful animals and very important in our natural makeup and natural balance and all of that. And I know they contribute a great deal to our nature. But I don't think that a beaver represents as much to UK history as Prime Minister Winston Churchill. I mean, the idea that you would even consider removing Winston Churchill from a banknote, I mean, that's pretty crazy to begin with. But this is what's happening in some of these European countries. They've let this PC madness basically take over everything. So now they're talking about replacing Prime Minister Churchill and replacing him with an animal, a beaver. That's crazy. That is just simply crazy. I mean, there's a reason that you have these images on your banknotes, like we do here with the dollar bill. There's a reason that the dollar bill, the $1 bill, is George Washington, the $5 bill, Abraham Lincoln, and so on. These are not just crazy selections. They represent your history. So when a little kid will come up to you and say, "Who is that?" or "What does that mean?" you can tell them, "Well, that's Winston Churchill, the great Prime Minister of the UK in their darkest hour in World War II, the man who inspired the country to survive." Or "This is Abraham Lincoln," or "This is George Washington," whatever. And that's what your banknotes do. That's what your dollar bill does. That's what these images do. They preserve your history. And trust me, if you don't have a history, if you don't preserve your history, then you don't know where you came from. I mean, imagine, for example, if you're a member of a family and they delete all your family pictures. Imagine, many of us have pictures of our family on the wall. Imagine if all of that disappears. And when they ask you, "Well, where did I come from?" "Oh, I don't know." "Who was your grandfather?" "I don't know." Pretty soon, you don't have the same sense of family that you did before. And with a country, these historical images, that's what preserves your sense of history and where you came from. So I hope they reconsider this over at the UK. I know they're going a little nutty over there lately, but I hope they reconsider something like this, because how in the world can you even think? Who came up with this? Of replacing this would be a £5 banknote with replacing Winston Churchill with an animal. I mean, that's just plain crazy. I don't know how how else to say it. Well, I'm going to wish here as we close, I'm going to wish a happy number 93 to a lady by the name of Barbara Feldon, Feldon. And, I don't know how many of you remember her, but if you remember that television show, Get Smart, which was kind of like a comedy about secret agents back in the 60s, Maxwell Smart, that was the name of the secret agent in that series. Well, there was a young woman who used to play with him, and she was called Agent 99, if you remember her. Very pretty young woman. Well, she's 93 today. Man, how time flies. So happy numbers 93 to 99. That was a great show. I have to tell you, that was a great show. Get Smart. So happy number 93 to 99. What can I say? Thanks for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.